Hi, welcome again to QuickBiz Education. My name is Dwayne Bligen, and today we're going to be looking at quotas. So let's look at the quota diagram here quickly. So remember that quotas are normally imposed by governments as a way of protecting the local manufacturers and also to encourage more production in the local industries. I always see quotas as, dealing with quantity, whereas tariff is about money. So I try to use those to make it a little easier for me. All right, good. So let's run into this quickly. Now, when we're drawing and constructing our graph for quotas, the first thing that we need to have are our two curves, our two graphs, right? So supply and demand. Now, the supply represents all the suppliers within the domestic market, and the demand curves represents all the domestic demand. All right. So what is the goods that are being demanded locally? All right. So we need to have that. Now we can also go from the viewpoint, and I'm just going to use pull up my pen here quickly. So we can go from the viewpoint that where the demand and supply crosses each other, then what we find is that that will be the equilibrium. So what we're saying, without international trade, right, this is what will be happening in the free market, right? The consumers will be paying a higher price, and then they would be getting less at that higher price. However, because of international trade, there is something that is called the world price. So what is the world price? This is where any price that you pay outside of your domestic market, that is what we would consider to be the world price. So here, that's the next line that we need to put in here when you're constructing your graph. So at $5, this would be our world price, right? And we also have the world supply here. So what we're saying is that at $5, a customer would be able to buy an imported product, which would be lower than if they were to buy it in their domestic market. Okay, good. Now, let's look firstly at the domestic supply curve. Good. So from this point up to the world price, what we're saying is that the domestic producers, suppliers, the ones who are able to compete against the world price, because the world price is very low, okay, and maybe they can't compete. So up to this point of $5, this line, it represents how much the domestic suppliers can produce or compete against this $5. Okay, so this part represented, so they can supply 20. However, in the international market, on the world stage, what we find here is that the prices are lower, or this price is lower. Hence, what we find is that 70 is being demanded. So we can see this would be the supply domestically, and this would be the demand domestically. Okay, so if more is being demanded than what is being supplied, then that creates a shortage. It means then that we need, or the government would be required now to supply or find a way where the 50 million can be supplied, because people are asking for more, but they want 70, we can only give 20 in the domestic market. Hence, we need to think about importing the 70. Okay. However, if we were to import this 70, then this 50, sorry, it's 50 less 20. If we were to ask for all of this 50 from the international market, it means then that this would be destroying the local producers. So what the government might do now is to impose a quota on the foreign investors, right? So rather than taking the 50, the governments would come up with something and they would say, you know what, we're putting a restriction. We know we need 50. But if we were to take the total amount of 50, that is going to destroy our local industries, because only a certain number of our local producers can really compete with the international price, with the world price. So the government then would want to impose a quota and say, you know, we're not going to take all the 50, but guess what? We will take 30. So this 30 million now, it represents the quota amount. We're saying that's the quantity that we can take, okay? So what you observe here then is that the impact on the investors is that their revenue is going to be less. The amount that they can export into India is going to be less, okay? So that's the first thing, right? So let's go back over this. First, this line represents how much is being produced by the domestic market. Now, we need 50, but we can't take the entire 50 from outsiders, because if we were to do that, then it's going to destroy the local industry. So, hey, the government impose a quota and say, you know what, we can only import 30. So what is going to happen with the 20? Now, because there is still a high demand, the government then, local producers then will now have an opportunity to get back into the market. So this line from this point here would be now the local producers getting back into the market, even though they weren't effective, right? They will get back in the market. When they're now back into the market, what will happen is that now this creates a new equilibrium price where the supply curve plus quota, because now we can discontinue this curve and now it shifts over here now, because this represents the domestic market. So this would be the supply domestically plus the quota. Now when that crosses the demand, what we find is that it creates a new equilibrium point. Okay, so here from this point at the world price, in the domestic market now, what we find is that there is going to be an increase in the price moving from $5 to $7, which means that the demand is going to be reduced. Okay, so demand is now reduced where because there's a higher price, and the law of demand states that if there's a higher price, the consumers are going to demand less. However, if there's a higher price for suppliers, then they're going to want to produce more. Okay, so in this case, what we find is that there is now a reduction in the amount being demanded. But let's jump over to the supply side. Let's look at this. At the same price, what we observe is that there is now an increase in the amount being supplied. All right, so I hope you make notes of those 2 points. Okay, with the implementation of the quota, there is going to be a higher price. When there is a higher price, consumers are going to demand less, producers are going to produce more. Okay, so we have that. Now, the point here where these consumers are, instead of demanding the 20, right, they're saying, you know what, we don't want it, just give us 10. It means then that this point becomes a deadweight loss. All right, because whereas the producers are benefiting, the consumers, they are losing out. Because if we were to look at all of this here, this would have been here, this big triangle would now be considered the what? The consumer surplus. But after the the quota has been implemented, we now observe that there is now a reduction in the consumer surplus. Okay, so this is a little messy, but I hope you are following what I'm doing. Good. On this side of this triangle here, this now is saying that these local producers should be able to produce at the 20 needed. However, they can't, because they are not effective. So they can only produce 10. Again, we have a deadweight loss here, and this is because of efficiency. They're not using their resources properly. Okay, so all of this is because of efficiency. right? So this triangle here look like an equilateral triangle. It represents the deadweight loss both for the producers and also for the the consumers. Okay, so we have this. Now what we want to look at here, and just to wrap this up, is that we need to be able to understand the impacts on the different stakeholders. So one, with foreign investors, guess what? They are going to be earning less. The government, however, will not be gaining anything, really, because think about it as a quantity. So if you reduce the quantity, you're not really gaining much. However, this part here in the middle, and I could color that yellow, is going to be like anyone who has access to license, they can earn some money there. Okay, so what we find here also, let's look quickly at the producer's surplus. Now, before the increase in the quota was implemented, and there's now a higher price, the producers were just getting this little portion here, from here to here. They were getting A. But now, because of the change in price, they're getting A and B. Okay, they're getting all of this portion now. So the producers are happy because now they're back in the market. They can produce at a higher price, even if they're not being effective, right? But the consumers, on the other hand, they're not so happy because guess what? They have lost out on the consumer surplus. So they were getting, they were willing to pay a certain amount, maybe 15, but they were getting it at 5. So that's a surplus for them, right? So that is very good. So this is really just an overview of the quotas diagram. I hope that this will help in terms of your understanding. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good day.